Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan, and today I want to discuss 4 classic science fiction books and let you know whether I think they're worth your time, what kind of readers I think they might appeal to. So let's get started with The Shockwave Rider by John Brunner. Nicky Haflinger is on the run, a fugitive from Tarnova, the high-powered think tank that had educated him. He had to find a way to restore sanity to the computerized masses and to save a world on the brink of disaster. But that's when his Tarnova teachers got him back in their labs. The Shockwave Rider is part of the cyberpunk genre, although that term wasn't coined until the 1980s, so I consider this a proto-cyberpunk novel. When I combined the description of the book along with the title and this book cover in my head, I imagined a fun, fast adventure with some pulpy action and intrigue, and that's not remotely what this book is. This is an ideas-driven novel exploring themes to do with politics, economics, and technology. Or to put that another way, people talking in rooms. Now, I like books that dive into sci-fi ideas, but I think they work best when they are paired with engaging characters or narratives. In terms of the characters, some of them did display some personality, but none of them displayed any character arcs or development that I particularly connected with. In regard to the story, it's told in a very disjointed way. It has a distinct new wave vibe. It bounces around timelines a lot, and while there were some that I enjoyed more than others, there was nothing ever that really hooked me in. The ideas really are the focus of the book. In particular, how technology can be used to control the masses that have no privacy and live in fear of the powers that control them. Technological solutions to this future society's problems are rarely little more than just a distraction and don't add to a fulfilling experience. They also come with some both intended and unintended consequences. Some of these thematic explorations are still relevant today, and the book was influential in a number of ways. An example of which is Brunner's DataNet tapeworms actually inspired the use of the phrase worms to describe certain types of computer viruses. Overall, this is a book I respect because of its creativity and influence, but it's not necessarily one that I really enjoyed reading. The lack of character development or story progression inhibited my ability to really connect with the story, despite some of the interesting ideas and world building. In the end, The Shockwave Rider was a 6 out of 10 for me. Future Jonathan here, reminding past Jonathan that at the end of the video, I will be spinning the quantum wheel in order to find out what sci-fi book will be the Patron Pick of the month. So stick around to the end of the video and watch me click this thing. Moving on to our second book, we have Nova by Samuel R. Delany. Illyrion is an energy source so precious that Captain Lork von Ray is willing to fly through an imploded sun to obtain it. His crew includes a gypsy musician and a moon-obsessed scholar that don't know Lork's quest is actually fueled by revenge. The basic story of Nova is a quest in the form of a space mission, but Nova reads like the literary equivalent of listening to psychedelic free jazz on mushrooms. The story is mainly told through exposition, but it isn't always that easy to follow because the characters' dialogue ebbs and flows between stream of consciousness and seeming non-sequiturs. And all this is packaged with Delany's prose that lands somewhere between inspiring and confusing. There's an expression I came up with a while ago to describe this kind of reading experience, and that is, the sentences make sense, but the pages don't. And what I mean by this is, if this were a painting, it would be the opposite of a Monet. I can make sense of some of the smaller details, but when I step back and try and take the whole thing in, I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at. There were moments where I would find myself locking into a discussion on art and language, and I was really enjoying myself. And then the novel would lose me because I never felt like I really had a solid grasp on the objectives and obstacles and stakes or motivations. This book bounces between hard sci-fi info dumps and then entire chapters dedicated to tarot card readings. It's a wild ride, but when I got off the ride, I'm not sure I could tell you exactly what just happened, so I'm not sure I could say that it's one that I loved. Overall, Delany is a unique writer, and I'm sure I'll be tempted to try him again in the future, but I'm going to need to be in a very specific mood. I also gave this one a 6 out of 10. Alright, up next for our third book we have The 3 Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch by Philip K. Dick. On Mars, the harsh climate could make any colonist turn to Can D, which enables users to inhabit a shared illusory world. The mysterious Palmer Eldritch arrives with a new drug called Choosy, one that might bring the user closer to God. but in a world where everyone is tripping, no promises can be taken at face value. This is the 5th PKD book I've read. I was somewhat mixed on The Man in the High Castle, but I really enjoyed Ubik, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and A Scanner Darkly. PKD has a distinct style, and while reading the 3 Stigmata, I remember thinking to myself that of the PKD books that I've read, this one felt like the most PKD. It conveys a trippy sense of paranoia, it queries the nature of reality, it explores the effects of consumerism, and it asks the ultimate spiritual questions. It's also one of his more sci-fi books. There are some big sci-fi ideas and lots of technology, which PKD gives some rather fun and clever names to. PKD is a serious writer and not as overtly funny as sci-fi writers like Douglas Adams or Kurt Vonnegut, but I think PKD's sense of humor is something that doesn't get mentioned enough. By his own admission, he tended to focus more on the ideas than the characters, but the characters in this story that range from pathetic to sympathetic, I found to be rather entertaining. This is a trippy book. I think it will appeal to readers that enjoy the feeling of being inside a dream within a dream. And while it may sound a little confusing, as was the case with Nova, I had a much better reading experience with the 3 Stigmata. And that's because, even though at any single moment I may not have been able to tell you exactly what was happening, there was always a clear sense of what the mystery was, and PKD was constantly offering you potential solutions to that mystery, and that helped pull me along through the story. In this book, PKD weaves together big sci-fi ideas with deep philosophical concepts, and he does so through an imaginative narrative. The skill with which he navigates this balancing act is a real testament to his experience and brilliance as a writer. The 3 Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch is not quite as well known as the other 4 PKD books that I mentioned, but I think it absolutely deserves to be considered in that top tier. For me, it was a 9 out of 10. As of now, I think this is my second favorite PKD book, right behind Ubik, as I thought the ending to Ubik was just perfect. But I love this book and I can't wait to read more. I think the PKD book that I try next will be Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said. And just quickly, before we get to our last book, if you enjoy this kind of sci-fi content, feel free to check out the links in the description to my Discord server and my Patreon memberships, where you can become one of my robots, androids, or cyborgs like Nima and a New Eden. Alright, our 4th and final book for today is The Restaurant at the End of the Universe by Douglas Adams. Facing annihilation at the hands of the warlike Vogons? Time for a cup of tea. Join the cosmically displaced Arthur Dent and his uncommon comrades in arms in their desperate search for a place to eat as they hurtle across space, powered by pure improbability. This is the sequel to the much-beloved Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I really enjoyed the first book. It was a borderline all-time favorite for me. So, what did I think of the sequel? To start, I think a lot of the strengths carry over into the second book. You have an absurd adventure full of creative places and personalities, aided by the in-world guidebook, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy itself. Douglas Adams is very witty, and he does a great job of writing absurd jokes, often disguising them with very mundane setups as misdirects before the punchline. I will say, however, that I definitely laughed more in the first book. I think both the quantity and the hit rate of the jokes was higher for me in The Hitchhiker's Guide. And something else that I preferred in the first book was the perspective and point of view of Arthur Dent. The sequel spends less time with Arthur, and I really like him as a character because, as a very ordinary human, his reactions to the events that happen in the story really highlight how absurd things are, and he gives great comedic reactions to things. In a zany environment, if you don't have at least one grounded character, some of that zaniness can start to lose its impact. This is often touted as the funniest series in science fiction, but I wasn't aware of how depressing it is. And that's not a bad thing, it's just that I wasn't mentally prepared for it. When I see a horror movie, I want to be scared. When I read a comedy, I want to laugh. And I found this book to be just as tragic as it was comedic. Blindside and Death's End are 2 other very bleak books that I absolutely loved. I enjoyed the thought experiments and I liked the thrills. And even if I have a different perspective, they gave me a lot to think about. But I'm not sure what new perspective this book gave me to think about beyond everything is pointless? Douglas Adams often gets compared to Kurt Vonnegut, as they're both darkly funny science fiction writers. And I wouldn't describe Vonnegut as an optimist either. I actually think that Vonnegut would share a lot of the same concerns as Adams when it comes to the nature of existence. However, while he also explores the absurdness and senselessness of the universe, I think he offers the reader meaning through art and love and comedy and empathy, and I just didn't find an equivalent to latch onto in The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. I really enjoyed The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and when it came to The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, I once again liked the creativity and the humor. But I just didn't quite connect in the same way to the story and the characters and the themes. In the end, this was a 7 out of 10 read for me. But before we go, welcome to the Quantum Wheel, where all of the patron picks are both simultaneously picked and not picked until we observe a winner. Let's find out what I'll be reading in the month of November. Spin bonus wheel. A wheel I almost forgot to spin. What will it land on? Steel World, will it finally be? Congratulations! Bridge 4's been voting for Steel World for a while. Recruited some teammates, some patron teammates, in order to get Steel World the votes it needed for the wheel to finally land on its favor. So I think this is a fun action space mission. Check it out. I'll throw the picture up there. You can get a sense of what it looks like. I didn't know much about it, but it sounds like a fun read. Maybe it's going to break up some of the classic sci-fi, the hard sci-fi that I've been reading recently with a fun adventure in Steel World. Join me if it sounds interesting. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on those 4 classic sci-fi books. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash or just gently click the subscribe button, and you can find more sci-fi content over here.